A flat twin is a two-cylinder internal combustion engine with the cylinders on opposite sides of the crankshaft. It is a flat engine with two cylinders, used in motorcycles for more than a century. Flat twins have also been used in automobiles, light aircraft, stationary power plants, and household appliances. Early flat twin motorcycles' engines were mounted with the cylinders in line with the frame. This caused uneven cooling of the cylinders and required the motorcycle to have a long wheelbase. Later flat twin motorcycles' engines were mounted with the cylinders across the frame for better air cooling and a shorter wheelbase. Disadvantages of this layout include torque reaction in the motorcycle in turns and the potential to damage cylinder heads. Crank configurations. The traditional crank configuration used with flat twin engines is the boxer twin, whose 180 degrees crankshaft moves the pistons in phase with each other. In this configuration, the primary force generated by one piston counteracts the generated by the other at all times, resulting in excellent primary balance. Since the pistons are not in line with each other, the equal and opposing forces generate a rocking couple on the crankshaft. Unlike the ignition of a V-twin or a 180 degrees parallel twin, a boxer engine has equally spaced firing intervals, adding to its smoothness. The flat twin engine in the 1897 Lanchester 8-horsepower Phaeton had two counter-rotating crankshafts. Each piston was attached to one crankshaft by a thick connecting rod and to the other crankshaft by two thinner connecting rods, one on either side of the other piston's thick connecting rod. This allowed both cylinders to have the same axis. It also had the torque reaction of one crankshaft cancel the torque reaction of the other, cancelling torque reaction in the engine. The pistons in the Lanchester engine moved so that one piston was on top while the other was at bottom dead center, creating an uneven firing cycle. Lanchester used this engine design until 1904. There have been flat twin engines with one crank pin shared by both connecting rods, thereby have only one crank throw. An experimental aircraft engine built before 1910 by Richard Pearce in New Zealand had both pistons and both connecting rods as part of a single, rigid assembly that drove the crank pin through a sliding bearing contained within a crosshead. Crankcase pressure. Uniquely among flat engines, a boxer twin suffers from differences in crankcase pressures as the pistons alternately compress and expand the crankcase gases. This issue is usually addressed by means of a crankcase breather, as in the BMW R90S. This crankcase pumping effect is also found on singles and 360 degrees parallel twins. Crankcase pressure differentials have scope for providing a form of supercharging, but while such an innovation has yet to be used on a production engine, it has been used to aid lubrication. Ignition systems. Boxer twin engines are well suited to the wasted spark ignition system, a distributorless ignition system using a double-ended coil firing both spark plugs on each revolution, that is, on both the compression stroke and the exhaust stroke. This system requires only a single contact breaker and single coil to run two cylinders. Applications. Motorcycles. The first flat twin motorcycle engine was the FE-Acute, later renamed Fairy, which was built by the Light Motors Company from 1905 until the company folded in 1907. The Douglas Engineering Company, one of Light Motors' suppliers, took over the manufacturing rights and developed motorcycles based on the FE-Acute system under their own name. BMW Motorrad manufactures a number of flat twin-engine motorcycles, as do Ural and DNEPR. Engine alignment. Cylinders along frame. The 1905 FE-QT bicycle engine system included a flat twin engine, mounted with the cylinders in line with the frame, with chain drive to a primary shaft with a pulley driving the rear wheel of the bicycle. The 1907 Douglas, developed from the FE-QT system, had a belt drive to the rear wheel driven directly from the engine. Later developments of the Douglas motorcycle were made with the cylinders in line with the frame until the Second World War. Other early flat twin motorcycles used a similar layout, with the cylinders aligned along the frame and therefore with the crankshaft running transverse to the frame. This position allowed the use of a conventional motorcycle drivetrain by belt chain to the rear wheel. Another advantage of this layout is its low center of gravity. However, in this layout, the front cylinder is more heavily cooled than the rear cylinder, and the wheelbase tends to be excessive due to the length of the engine. In 1914, the main supplier of rear hub gearboxes, Sturmey Archer, introduced a 3-speed countershaft gearbox with integral kickstarter. The photograph at right shows the gearbox located low down behind the engine where the kickstart is convenient for operation. While this was a relatively easy modification for vertical single-cylinder V-twin-engined motorcycles, the length of the pair of cylinders along the frame made this location difficult without having a long wheelbase. Douglas, and the FE-QT motorcycle that preceded it, had used a countershaft below the engine. Some later models used a gearbox above the engine, though where the engine was short enough, the preferred option was the conventional layout. In a review of flat twin engines in 1916, Motorcycle magazine listed the following: ABC 2.5 horsepower, 249 cc, the smallest flat twin at present on the road. ABC 3.5 horsepower, 494 cc, designed by G.W. Bradshaw. Bradbury 3.5 horsepower, 499 cc, introduced C1914. Brough 3.5 horsepower, 497 cc. All Brough motorcycles used the flat twin layout from end of 1914. Brough 6 horsepower, 692 cc, developed by Brough during the war and mainly intended for sidecar work after the war. Douglas 2.75 horsepower, 345 cc, the original Douglas, but with mechanically operated inlet valves from 1912. Douglas 4 horsepower, 544 cc, an updated design bearing little in common with the smaller engine. Humber 6 horsepower, 746 cc, water-cooled and with Claudel Hobson automatic carburetor. Humber 3.5 horsepower, 497 cc, brand new in October 1916 with Longmire Hardy carburetor. Matchless 6 horsepower, 732 cc, expected for 1917 season. Indian 2.5 horsepower, 257 cc, the only flat twin at present on the American market. Montgomery 6 horsepower, 688 cc, produced essentially for sidecar work. Williamson 8 horsepower, 964 cc, made by Douglas, intended originally water-cooled for cyclocars but made as water-cooled and air-cooled for Williamson motorcycles. Other motorcycles with this layout included the Helios in Germany and the Indian Model O and Harley-Davidson Model W in the United States. Engine alignment. Cylinders across frame. In 1916, ABC introduced a motorcycle with a flat twin engine with the cylinders across the frame, and therefore with the crankshaft running longitudinally when referenced to the frame. To accommodate chain drive, the ABC used a bevel drive at the gearbox to change the direction of the drive through 90 degrees. The 1920 1933 BMW R32 used a similar engine position with a drive shaft using bevel gears to power the rear axle. This position allowed both cylinders to protrude into the airflow, providing excellent air cooling for each cylinder. The Harley-Davidson XA, which used a flat twin engine with the cylinders across the frame, maintained an oil temperature 100 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than a Harley-Davidson WLA with a V-twin with the cylinders in line with the frame. Many motorcyclists appreciate the way the cylinders in this layout provide protection to the rider in the event of a collision or fall, and keeps the feet warm in cold weather. A disadvantage of this layout is that it exposes the cylinders and valve covers to the danger of collision damage. Longitudinal crankshaft mounting is also associated with a torque reaction that tends to twist the motorcycle to one side on sharp acceleration or, when opening the throttle in neutral, and in the opposite direction on sharp deceleration. Many modern motorcycle manufacturers correct for this effect by rotating flywheels or alternators in the opposite direction to that of the crankshaft. Another disadvantage of this layout is that the engine has to be high enough in the frame to provide the cylinder heads with banking clearance in turns, which raises the flat twin engine's otherwise low center of gravity. Automobiles. The Lanchester Engine Company used the twin-crank flat twin engines from 1897 until 1904, when they were reincorporated as the Lanchester Motor Company. Benz and Amp CIE showed the first boxer engine, the two-cylinder Contra engine, in 1897. Flat twin engines were used in some of Henry Ford's early cars, including the Ford 1903-04 Model A, Model C, and Model F. Flat twin engines were later used in several economy cars, including Jowett cars from 1906 to 1937, and later in the Jowett Bradford van from 1945 to 1954. Post-war Citroën and Panhard front-wheel drive cars, rear-engined BMW cars, Steer Push 500, DAF Daffodil, and the Toyota Publica and Toyota Sports 800. Brazilian manufacturer Gurgel Motors developed the water-cooled Enetron flat twin engine based on the Volkswagen air-cooled Boxer 4. The Enetron engine was used in Gurgel's Bridge 800, Super Mini and Moto Machine cars between 1988 and 1995. Aviation flat twins have been used to power light aircraft from the first decade of the 20th century, although most piston-engined aircraft have used more cylinders for more power. Notable flat twin aircraft engines include the Pierce monoplane, Aeronca E107 and E113, the Praga B2, and the Bristol Cherub. In larger aircraft, flat twin engines have been used in auxiliary power units. A notable example was made by ABC Motors between the World Wars. During World War II, the Riedel firm in Germany designed and manufactured a two-stroke flat twin engine to start Junkers Jumo 004 axial flow turbojets. Miscellaneous. Maytag used its Model 72 flat twin engines to power washing machines, although they were used as proprietary engines for other purposes as well. Maytag began manufacturing the Model 72 engine in 1937 and, after a break in production from May 1942 to June 1945 due to World War II, continued manufacturing them until the 1950s. Production ended sometime between 1952 and 1960. During World War II, motorcycle manufacturer Douglas built generators powered by the flat twin engines. Norman Engineering Company produced flat twin generators from 1932 to 1968, and Enfield Industrial Engines produced 250cc and 350cc flat twin two-stroke petrol stationary engines during the war, which were used for generators and other military uses. After the war they built flat twin air-cooled diesel engines, with applications ranging from farm use to marine use. Coventry Victor introduced a diesel version of their existing 688cc petrol flat twin in 1932, and went on to produce flat twin diesel and petrol engines for a variety of industrial and marine use as well into the post-war period. Two-stroke flat twins were a popular choice for use in outboard motors, as they were smoother than single-cylinder engines. They lost popularity in the late 1940s to straight twin two-strokes with 180-degree crankshafts that were easier to start and had an acceptable amount of vibration.